Brilliant, thank you. So I'm going to pop my screen on and I'm going to ask somebody just to let me know that it's actually sharing. Helps if I click the right thing. Okay, can I have a little thumbs up from somebody?
Yes, there, Julie.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Great, thank you so much for joining us. I'm not sure how many we have in our little virtual room, and ordinarily we would really like to hear who everyone is, but I think because time is so tight, we'll probably just kick off. We will have an opportunity to have a bit of a conversation once we finish the presentation. So just to let you know how we've set the session up, I'm just going to give you a bit of a history around who we are and what we do, and a little bit of background around the post-19 work. Then I'm going to pass on to Crina, who's going to talk about the work they've done in Camden, and then pass on to Pat and her colleague now, who are going to talk about Calderdale, and then just a few more slides at the end before we go into a bit of a group discussion. So just moving forward. For people who don't know us, actually, let me jump back because you may not all know who we are. So we are this organisation down here, the National Development Team for Inclusion, and alongside Mott MacDonald and the Council for Disabled Children, we have the contract that's called Delivering Better Outcomes Together. And we've been involved in this contract since the beginning of the reforms, actually. A number of my colleagues were involved in supporting the department to write Section 8 of the Code, Preparing for Adulthood from the earliest years. So that kind of is what we hang everything on to. And I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so I wonder if somebody could just turn their mic off. Thank you. I struggle a bit with feedback, certainly when I've got my headphones on. So yeah, that's a little bit about us. My name is Julie Pointer and I am the programme lead for the Preparing for Adult programme, also the Children and Young People's lead at NDTi as well. And for those of you that are interested, my background is social care. So I qualified as a social worker many, many years ago now, and have worked in the world of transition and SEND pretty much since I qualified. So as part of our contract, each year we've looked at a different theme that sits within the Preparing for Adulthood agenda. And for last year and this year, the area that we've focused on is post-19. And particularly that's come out, I think, as a concern from the department that post-19 keeps being raised as a problem area. So we were asked to focus on some of the particular challenges and think about some of the solutions that sit within post-19. And I think, already evidence that there's not enough awareness across the system of the importance of planning early for preparing for adulthood. We've got a whole range of evidence now that sits within those 4 preparing for adulthood outcomes. I won't go into any detail about those today, but there's lots of resource and material that we have on our website for you to have a look at in the future. And also, I think the other kind of challenge that was being placed to us was that within the area SEND inspections, there was a highlight that education, health and care plans were too education focused and not necessarily holistic enough, hence our desire to look at how we could kind of improve things around this area too. So the work stream invited local areas to be part of the work. I think we had a significant number of local areas who put themselves forward, and those were the main areas that we were looking at in terms of how we could support people. That just gives you a bit of an idea of where the areas were coming from, a list of people who were working with those areas. This is the Preparing for Adulthood team. And then this gives you a bit more detail on what the areas chose to work on. So planning was a particular area, particularly person-centered planning, that came up quite a lot. Curriculum, thinking about how we could embed the Preparing for Adulthood outcomes within the curriculum, ensure that it created a better opportunity for young people as they move forward into their adult life. Multi-agency working, really crucial around PFA. Co-production, especially the voice of young people, which you'll hear a little bit more about in a minute. provision and support, including 5-day package, which our Corderdale colleagues are going to talk about, and also complex needs. I think for us, we've really championed the idea that those with the most complex needs with the right support can move into having a really positive adult life. So we have 2 reports that we've put together that share the key findings, and you can find them on our website. There was an interim report and then a final report that came out earlier on this year, and that gives you an example of some of the topic areas as well. So some of the key findings that I think we're looking to kind of move forward with this year, person-centered planning being essential to ensuring that young people have their voices heard. And I'll share with you some tools that we've developed this year that have helped with person-centered planning for young people. Particularly thinking about reviews as well, making sure that young people's views are heard both before and during reviews, and that they're enabled to participate, to have a really good look at what's important to them and what their hopes and aspirations are for the future. And then just a final reminder really of chapter 8 of the Code of Practice, particularly in relation to reviews, that local authorities must ensure that the Education, Health and Care Plan review at Year 9 and every review thereafter includes a really good focus on preparing for adult life. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Crina. Crina, I hope you're there.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Cool. Do you want to just let me know when you want the slides moved forward?
Thank you, I will. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Julie, for inviting us. And we are pleased to be here. So I'm going to introduce myself first, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do today. I only have 10 minutes. I'm going to talk about Camden's recent work on the Single Plan project and share the learning from my local area. And if I tell you about myself first, so I'm the head of Children, Young People's Disability Services in Camden now. For the last 2.5 years, it is a 0-25 service. So I'm a social worker and I trained in systemic practice over the last years. I first started working on the person-centered planning approaches about 17 years ago. And I was a social worker then in Surrey, and since I remained committed to improving the experiences of our disabled children we work with and the young people. Now, today, in my role now as a head of service in Camden, I think I have even greater opportunity to actually improve the experiences of young people we work with, because it's not about our establishments, it's not about our structures, how much we talk to each other or not, or if we get on with each other, if we have disagreements or agreements. It is about young people we work with. So we'll spend a bit of time to explore the concepts we started to look at in Camden and the ways we went about doing this, and how we're trying to change the way we approach education, health and care plans. So as I mentioned earlier, I have 10 minutes. If you have any questions, because things may resonate with you, then let's keep them till the end. So if I give you a bit of background about the Single Plan project in Camden, Camden is a very good borough in many ways. I mean, our inspectors are telling us this. Our families, most of our families telling us this. We do very good work in terms of the integration, and we have established pathways across health and social care in Camden. We have links into education. To give you an example, my office, when we were not virtual, I was sitting in the same office with the CAMS manager. We have a small number of looked after children. We have very few young people in hospitals. We have a large Bangladeshi community. And I'm saying this because we are one of the most diverse boroughs in the country, which is brings a lot of richness when it comes to the cultural aspect. And I think we don't always talk enough about disability in the context of race and ethnicity. So we are on a journey. We have we have a very good school in Borough, which is Swiss Cottage, and their reputation is good. And we also, over the last years, developed a personalized educational setting, which is a provision called Alexandra Center in Borough. And that's mainly for young people with severe and moderate learning disabilities. disability. Despite all this good work, we still have many young people who leave school or colleges, and they find themselves living a different life from what they wish, and one which is significantly more restricted than their non-disabled peers. And they continue to live at home with parents. We don't have many young people in employment, and young people are still very reliant on our services. So for many, there are low expectations about what they have a right to look forward to as adults, and the lack of meaningful consultation. So I think it's key for us to continue to identify young people's aspirations in relation to post-school education and health and social care needs, independent living and employment. So with this, so the Single Plan project started in Camden in 2018. It's a Department for Education funded project, and what we are trying to achieve. Maybe we can go to next slide. What we are trying to achieve is better quality person-centered planning. We know that across this complex area related to education, health and care plan, we have several disciplines, we have different roles and functions. We sometimes ask ourselves who takes the lead. So because of this, we still need to work on achieving that holistic approach across education, health, and social care for children and young people we work with. The project also is looking at streamlining the planning with a focus on life outcomes. So it's about creating a single conversation in one room. The project is called a Single Plan, but I think we are moving towards calling it a single conversation, because you'll see later on how difficult it is actually to bring plans together and make it one single plan as such when it comes to presenting it to the young person. So we want to achieve more meaningful engagement with children and young people. We want to reduce the duplication, not just for families, but also for professionals. And parents are telling us they are fed up with too many meetings. And of course, we hope to achieve joint and integrated working better one, and redesigning our templates if that's possible. And we'll continue to provide feedback on our learning. So how did we go about doing this? If we move on to the next slide. So the project started end of 2018. During 2019, we have had a couple of webinars and workshops with our professionals across children and adults, during which we have explored the notion of a single plan. We looked at a range of plans that exist for children and young people at any one time. And as most professionals who are in the room today would know, that you don't have one single plan there. You have an education, health and care plan, a pathway plan, could be a looked after children plan, or a child in need, or a child protection plan, an adult social care plan. So we looked at how many plans can be at one time for one person in the system, or how many plans the family need to navigate, or the young person. So we looked at their different functions and purposes, and there is overlap and duplication. That's the reality. And we looked at, then we met again, and we looked at how this overlap and duplication can actually be removed. And that's when we had the NDTi consultants observing and facilitating some of our reviews in schools and colleges. Now, the feedback is from professionals and the consultants who supported us with this. The education, health and care plans at year 9 are too education focused. And Julie mentioned as well, and I'm sure this is probably happening in other places. So the project helped us identify last year and early this year what our challenges are. Is the communication between services, which is seen as a barrier. We also looked at understanding across. Do we have a shared understanding between professionals? It's not always the case. Who takes the lead? It's a big question mark in the conversation. Who engages the young person? Are we engaging the young person before, during, after? Do we have to have a lead on who engages the young person as part of the review? So we've learned a lot over the last year and a half. During COVID, we have slowed down a little bit, but now we are going back into the next stage, because we have started the training for our professionals, which is about person-centered training, because everyone knows that what person-centered is about. It's just that we always, I think, need to remind ourselves how we can actually put this into practice. So that's where we are at the moment. We are going to meet again because we want to continue with facilitating now reviews within the Swiss Cottage and Alexandra Center, the main education settings we have in Camden. And as part of this, we are going to facilitate reviews between education and social workers. Most social workers and majority of families who attend the education, health and care plans, and that's one of our challenge, which is not on the slide, but I'm happy to share this. Everyone finds the education, health and care plans too education focused, as we mentioned earlier. There is a lot of time spent on education and targets around education, but at the end of the meeting, when there's left like 10 minutes, then the family or the social worker is invited to speak. And I think we have an opportunity there to do some room for improvement and also bring in the views of the young person. So moving forward, which is the last slide from me, we are going to continue to work on embedding the person-centered practice and the shared understanding. We don't do enough of person-centered practice, and everyone knows that it's not, although it's there, it's not happening in practice. We want to, as I mentioned earlier, the education health and care plans are too education focused. So we want to know more from families and young people. We want to bring their voices into the planning process and during the meetings. We need to hear more from young people and how we link their aspirations with the outcomes. And of course, we need to, as a result of this, develop a personalized offer. So we are now in I would say a stage 3, because we've done all the work last year. We continued with the work this year, but now this year from October, so as soon as reviews are starting, we're starting the reviews end of October, beginning of November. We are going to start facilitating those reviews as a social work team alongside our education colleagues. So I'm looking forward to provide some feedback as to how those reviews are going to happen and how we manage to improve the experiences of our young people in Camden. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Crina. I think what I'll do is I'll pass on to Pat and Glenn, and then we'll have questions at the end. And I know there's quite a lot going on. Oh, Pat, one step ahead of me. That's brilliant. Thank you. There's a lot of stuff in the chat, and we've got quite a few resources that we're popping in as we go along. And I'm hoping that Sheila, I think, was struggling to see the slides. I've sent them through to you. There'll be a slightly different order, and I can't send whilst I'm sharing, but I think you'll get the gist of what we're doing. Brilliant. So I'm now passing on to Pat and Glenn. Hopefully they're there.
Okay, I am. Are you there, Glenn? I got very excited that Glenn was here because I know that ordinarily he doesn't have access to Teams. So the backup is, because I'm the PFA coordinator for Yorkshire and Humber, that I would be around as well. But obviously, when we got into post-19 sites, we were looking for a variety. So some did focus on health in particular. Calderdale had a really strong reputation for what was called the 5-day offer. And people often describe Glenn as the Mr. 5-day offer to me. So like Camden, there are some common things, the focus on person-centered approaches, well established across health, education and social care, I would say, but also a particular issue around young people going to out of authority post-16, post-19 provisions. And there was one local provider particularly that families began to feel that's the only place really that we can go post-19. 5 years ago, there were about 27 young people in that provision. And as well as being, I suppose, expensive, the other issue was that young people came back and still required further preparation for adulthood. That, you know, they didn't have all of the independent skills that we might have hoped for before they went off to the college. They didn't have the community inclusion. They certainly hadn't built relationships in Calderdale. And the college was ill-equipped to enable that really to come back into Calderdale. There was less emphasis on local health checks and, you know, the GP reliance that we have once we get past 19. And in some areas, like Derbyshire, not necessarily Calderdale, there are lead GPs who've got, you know, that particular focus on young adults with LD, and that's been really supportive and positive. And now Calderdale have got only 2 or 3 young people post-19 who are at that college because of what's happened. Glenn, can I just check if you're there before we move on? Don't think he is. So what Calderdale also did, yeah, I'll carry on, was, you know, develop that accountability framework. Glenn often says that he starts by saying to families, should we have a brew? So he kind of really makes person-centered approaches very amenable to young people. Calderdale is a metropolitan borough. He would say to you it's not enormous, but he tends to know everybody. He's worked there for a long time, and he works within adult social care, but is very well known by children's services. So the 5-day offer can be some physical services that remain accessible, and often young people with more complex needs might enjoy the certainty of going to this one venue where they know they'll see their friends and there'll be some activities to support them. But for others, it will be completely bespoke. It will be, you know, what are you interested in? Glenn, you know, worked with a young man recently who wanted to get involved in gardening, and he wasn't a joiner. He didn't want to go down that route of a horticultural course at FE College, but he did start to garden for a local church community. He wasn't religious, but the combination of his work experience there and what he was able to achieve led to a proper job, as I'd say, not a full-time job, but a job. And then when it comes to, you know, that wider offer, Gig Buddies is just one example of community inclusion, where if I'm 19 or 20, I can sign up to go to a gig, whether that's a theatre, a music concert, wherever it may be, within Calderdale. And instead of going with, you know, my middle-aged parents, I'm able to go with someone who's the same age, from a mainstream background. And over time, you know, Calderdale have seen those relationships benefit both parties, because inclusion is good for everybody. And lots of young people who sign up, they stay with the programme because it's really good for them. So there are loads of really great activities that support community inclusion, and a community passport facilitates that. So I guess where we've just heard from Camden, Calderdale had strategic permission to make all of these things happen, but they've developed through individual approaches that kind of mesh that we need, that makes joint commissioning work really effectively. And I think if you saw what happened there and you spoke to some of the young people, you'd be really excited by it. Okay, I think we might want to move on. I'm sorry that we weren't able to hear from Glenn as well. So Julie, is it you or me?
It's me. Thank you, Pat. Yeah, can I suggest that we ask if people have any questions they want to put to Crina or to Pat? I don't know what's happened to Glenn. We didn't expect him to join, and then he said he could, and he seems to have disappeared, which is a real shame. But maybe if you could just pop your hand up or pop a question in the box, and then what we want to do is open up to a broader conversation. But I've just got a few more slides to share as well. Does anyone have a question at the moment? Yes. Oh, Sheila. Are you there?
Yeah.
Just check you're not on mute, Sheila.
Am I on mute still?
No, I can hear you now. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Thank you for this presentation. I'm a pediatrician up in Leeds, and I'm just really keen to know how did you get the GPs involved in the post-16 assessments? Did they get funding, or did were they just passionate? And
yeah, I mentioned that in passing, Sheila. I was just going to put and we'll put an email address in there for you. No, that was Derbyshire, so I did throw in a bit of Derbyshire, which I know isn't in Yorkshire and Humber, unlike Calderdale. But in Derbyshire, they have lead GPs. And I was just responding to the fact that in the box, what we've picked up on in other sites, other than the ones we've focused on today, are obviously lots of us know about the pathways that Southampton have developed, Ready, Steady, Go. In Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, they have care navigators. So they have 3 funded posts where colleagues attend annual reviews, and they've got a background as practitioner clinicians, but they now work really to give that information to the meetings, and also to draw information about the young person, and to navigate them across the 16, 18 or 19 health pathway. And that's funded by the clinical commissioning group in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And in Derbyshire, there is a split. There were 2 CCGs, and certainly the lead GP is funded by the clinical commissioning group. And I'm going to give you the contact for Jane Hankins there.
Okay. Crina, did you want to add anything?
Because the Ready, Steady, Go is really not tailored for young people with complex needs, with additional profound intellectual disability. It usually just works for people who don't have that intellectual disability, and they can take ownership for that transition. But
yeah, I think some of the tools that I'm going to share in a minute will help you, Sheila, in that. I guess a lot of this as well is about families understanding what's available to them too. So it's vital that the Year 9 review looks at health pathways, and not just kind of services that are additional services, but looks at universal health pathways as well. Crina, did you have anything to add in Camden? I know you popped something in there.
No, I have mentioned in there that the fact that our health professionals are actually based in schools, including our CAMS teams. So this is a new project this year. The CAMS, I mean, our CAMS teams are actually based in schools, as well as our health professionals. Health professionals have historically been based in schools in Camden, and it helped a lot with the relationship there. But the question is very specific. I mean, Sheila, I'm going to ask our health leads. Because I'm managing the social work service. So I have already asked them, how does the transfer go? But for as long as the young person remains in school, that they are under children's health care, including pediatricians. But and the transfer then happens as soon as they turn 19. So we have that 1 year to create the transition, the transfer over. That's what I would like to add. But I'm going to specifically ask about the connection with the GPs for post-16. And I'll come back.
Thanks, Crina. And don't forget as well, we have the annual health checks that GPs are responsible for people with a learning disability as well. And there's quite a lot of resource and information out there to understand that pathway. Okay, any more questions? If not, I'll carry on. I think we're okay at the moment. Just a few more slides. I'm not going to go through these actually, but this will just give you an idea of some of the work that went on in one of the other areas that we work with, which was Holton. So again, looking at person-centered approaches, and they spent quite a lot of time with one of our associates who's a graphic facilitator, and created their vision for preparing for adulthood. So co-design with families in Holton. And then I just wanted to share with you before we open up a little bit to conversation. So some of you will be familiar, but possibly not everybody. During lockdown, we spent quite a lot of time pulling together a whole range of person-centered planning tools. So I know Crina's spoken a bit about person-centered planning already. It's been around for over 50 years now, designed by families. It was absolutely a response to families who really wanted to find a way to make sure that the people that they love and care about were central to plans for their future. So what we've done is we've taken these tools and put them into a suite with their own design. They've been tested out with young people, they've been tested out with parents, they've got fantastic feedback, and they're all available on our website to use for free. So I'm not going to go through them at detail, but there's a person-centered planning book that picks up things like, you know, what people like and admire about someone, the relationship map that gives you a really good idea of what's around for them at the moment, you know, what opportunities you might want to develop in the future. thinking about good support, what matters to young people, what's working, not working, all of these fundamental to looking at the Preparing for Adulthood review from year 9 onwards as well. And then thinking about young people's outcomes. So, you know, one of the things that we really promote is making sure that within an education, health and care plan, you've got Preparing for Adulthood outcomes from year 9, and that these are kind of looked at year on year as part of the annual review. What Matters Ireland, one of the things that Halton did was they took, this is a bit of a summary of some of those tools. So they now have this sitting in their education, health and care plan, and they've developed a similar one for families, for parents as well. One-page profile. Yeah, and that's kind of it. That's us. That's how you can get hold of us. I'm going to stop sharing and then open up for conversation and discussion. We've got probably about 20 minutes left. Okay, my screen's gone slightly weird, but I'm opening up. So in terms of conversation, I think we had a couple of questions that we were asked to put to you. One of them was around what activities and practice in your area, what approaches are you currently using? And the other was what might you do differently following conversations that you've heard from the main presentations and from this session as well. So I'm going to pop those two questions to you and see if anyone's got anything that they want to share. And again, pop your hand up. Oh yeah, Tiffany, yes, we're carrying on working with Kent. I know that you had some support from us in February. Sheila.
So in Leeds, we are our acute services or the hospital services have a fantastic sort of support network for transitions, and they're doing a sterling job. But in the wider community, we're still sort of trying to improve services. And we're looking at a citywide multi-agency, multidisciplinary transition network to involve literally all services, including GPs, social care, palliative care, and everybody, to try to see what we can do. But I think it's quite ambitious because I don't know what people's views are, because I think the educational healthcare plan and the PFA is great. But these young people that I'm involved with a complex neurodisability and learning needs, when they present to the hospital at the age of 16, they usually go down the cliff because they're still under a pediatrician in the community, but not from a hospital point of view. They have to go to the hospital. And the educational healthcare plan and the PFA does not provide the same focus like in A&E environment to look at what their needs are, and families find that quite hard, and also the communication needs. So we're trying to look at having a sort of a health document which would look at their health focused needs, but I don't know whether that is the right way to go, or whether really we should be still looking at a big document like the EHCP to incorporate health needs. And I'd just be keen to know what people's views are. I know that Alan Culver's work that he did do said that a transition transfer document was not considered to be helpful, but actually none of the families knew what a transition transfer document was.
So Sheila, what about a health action plan? Are you using those in Leeds?
Health action plan? No. No, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, so I think they're probably used more in the adult world than the children's world, but certainly and a kind of health pathway approach, there are things that you could consider. I don't know if you're familiar with Alder Hey Hospital created 10 steps to transition. Again, I'm very know about Alder Hey.
I'm familiar with them, but again, quite a lot of those focuses are on children with or young people with complex health needs without the intellectual disability, and with young people with health needs usually are catered to a bit better than those without any so a young person with cerebral palsy, with learning disabilities but no epilepsy, doesn't get the support I know that they should get it, but also a lot of it is around coding, because you need to be coded as having an intellectual disability or learning disability to get that annual health check. And a lot of young people are not coded. That's our fault as pediatricians. We still use the term global development delay or learning difficulty. And so they don't get coded appropriately, and so therefore can't access services either. But I'll look into the health action plan.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've got your email, so we can send some resources through. Yes, Terry, have you got something to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I think you're from Leeds, aren't you? And I thought you've got Louise Porter, who is the lead for transitioning for Leeds, who was funded as part of the Burdett nursing scheme for the transition work. So I would have thought she'd be able to support you with that.
She's on the acute trust, the Leeds Teaching Hospital Trust, so she's not in the community.
No, she works in the hospital. She's done quite a lot of transition
she's done a sterling job. That's why I said that she's done absolutely a sterling job in the hospital. But I'm talking about the children that are and the young people that are in the community.
I thought that she was leading the whole of the transition work across Leeds. Is that because she's done a few talks at Yorkshire and Humber sessions?
Well, she's now taken on a different national role, but we don't have a similar person in the community as Louise, and we are looking at that, as I sort of said, a transition network, but we don't have anybody helping us lead the work in the community with complex like the young person I described with the cerebral palsy and profound intellectual disability, a bit of reflux, those type of young people. If they have epilepsy or another acute health need, their needs are well catered to, and they are well served by Louise's team.
Okay, thank you.
Sheila, I think Crina's popped something in the chat as well. Crina, I don't know if you wanted to just say.
Yes, thank you. So Sheila, to respond to your question about the connection between the pediatricians and the adult colleagues, so our lead nurse said that the pediatrician in Camden usually hands over to the GP or any other consultant before the age of 18. And they should make the links. Of course, we still have some way. I mean, we can still improve on this, because I'm aware we still have some gaps. But and our data on health action plans post 16 is still very weak, but we are trying to get the health action plans in place by the GP before the age of 18, because that's the only way the GP can know more about the young person before they turn 18. And also we are aware that families themselves, they're not very aware, because they think if the pediatrician is there, then why do I need the GP? And we even run a session recently with parents. We have the parents forum once a month, where we discuss the difference between what a pediatrician does, what a GP does, and why you need your child to know about the GP. The GP needs to know your child and your family before the child turns 18. So which parents found it very helpful. So I think because it's also a responsibility for the parent, it's not just the schools or the pediatrician.
But I think 18 is too late. It has to be done at year 9.
I think that's about planning, isn't it, Sheila? So making sure that families understand. I know certainly when we've worked with families in the past, this concept that the paediatrician's going to be there forever, and of course that isn't the case. And often, young people are under a multitude of specialists as well. So, all of that moving to the GP can be a real challenge. It is about early planning and making sure that those links are there. And I guess it's about making sure that parents know that their GP will become their kind of first port of call moving forward too.
Yeah, but 18 is too late.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
18 is far too late. It has to be done early. So has anybody during the COVID period done virtual meetings with the GP? I was just sort of wondering, because now people are much more used to using video acrex and Microsoft Teams, or whether a joint planning from year 9 onwards is being considered with the GPs as a part of their annual health check?
See, Sheila, that was always a dream of mine, that you would get a GP to attend year 9 reviews. I'd be surprised there's anyone in this room who's been successful, but I'd be really curious to hear if they have. shout now or forever hold your peace.
Julie, just to respond to the chat box, I'll try and put the other PFA resources into the chat box, but Chris has picked up a couple of times on, it's really critical to start before year 9, the earlier the better. And just that reminder about the 0 to 25 outcomes grid and how that helps some of the thinking. Oh, thanks for the link, Julie. I just wondered if Chris wanted to come in. Or Tiffany.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I hope you can all hear me. I struggle to mute and unmute, as most of us do. Yeah, I'm a CYPDS manager, and a lot of our conversations are around preparing for adulthood from the earliest years, and getting parents and young people into that mindset that they need to think about post 16 and post 19 from early on and not leave it until year 9. So that's why I keep hammering that, I'm afraid. In my opinion, year 9 is too late to start those conversations. And particularly for those parents, I was trying to find a way of typing it and my fingers wouldn't work properly. But for those parents who've got children with particularly complex needs, if you're suddenly saying to them in year 9, oh, well, actually, you've got to start thinking about the fact that your child may not necessarily agree with what you think is best for them in the future. That all needs to be introduced from a much earlier age. And it's where your local CYPDS can help. So if you haven't got good links with them, I'm going to plug the CYPDS. Please do make contact with them because they'll be so pleased to help. It saves a lot of bother.
Thank you, Chris. And we have done some great training with the CYPDS team as well around PFA. So yeah, really appreciate your plug. Thank you. And absolutely agree, it needs to start much earlier on. Terry.
I think from where I work, I work in a CCG, so slightly different. I think it's not discussed with parents that actually come their child's 18th birthday, unless they've followed the legal framework, they don't have the right to consent for things for their child anymore. And I think that comes as a real shock to people, that suddenly letters aren't directed to parents, that actually you don't just have the automatic right to decide whether your child has surgery or not. And I think there's a lot to be said for actually warning people. And obviously people with a learning disability, they can't have a lasting power of attorney. It needs to go down a different route. And it's making sure that, because it's a huge shock for families, because for the family, their child is still their child. The day before they're 18 and the day after they're 18, nothing changes. But we all need to be mindful that an adult can't consent for another adult unless we've got the appropriate legal frameworks behind us. And I think a lot of people forget that.
I absolutely agree, Terry, and I think that's why it's really important that planning starts earlier on with the whole family, with the child and the young person at the centre of it. I think as well, there's still a lack of knowledge and understanding in the children's world about the Mental Capacity Act too. So there's some learning that I think can be done. Adult colleagues generally are pretty spot on around mental capacity, and there's some sharing there, isn't there, kind of reaching down to the children's world so that people understand across the board and sharing with families as well.
I think I might have to disagree with you a bit, Julie, on whether the adult services are spot on with mental capacity, having done a few leader reviews.
Probably better then, maybe. That was perhaps not the
children's
best.
services,
yeah,
but there's still some work to be done.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I appreciate that pulling me up. You're absolutely right.
I'm just going to come in quickly and remind everyone that we've only got 5 minutes left.
Yep, thank you, Hope. And I was looking for, so I think it was Tiffany who was asking about outcomes from much earlier on. Tiffany, we have got an outcomes framework from the earliest years that is somewhere on our website, and I'm going to find it and pop it in the chat. And if I don't find it, I'll make sure it goes out to you as well. I mean, I think just to kind of add to that, really, there are some schools now who are doing some great work around embedding the curriculum. So making sure that PFA sits within the curriculum from earlier on. And I mean, a couple of schools spring to mind, particularly around employment. There's the Castle School in Newbury, who've created what they call the World of Work. So it's their employment pathway, and they've got employment embedded from year 6, I think, as part of their curriculum. So we'll make sure that we share these things with you too. And if you want to get in contact with us and want some extra support, we're really happy to help you there. Any other questions or comments from people before we finish? Yeah, Castle School's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Yep, Sheila will make sure you have a health action plan template for you, or some examples of where it's working. Yeah, I agree, Natasha. I think Natasha's talking about better working between adults and children. I often talk about the passing of the baton. I think there's a couple of things in that. One, that we need to be really mindful that young people don't need to transition into an adult life, and that services should be there to support them to lead a good life. But I think the other is about making sure that, you know, when children's pass that baton on into adult services, that at one point 2 people should still be holding on to it. And I know that sounds really idealistic, but you know, I think that there are some real challenges that we can do better. Is nodding her head there with me as well. Yeah, cool. Any other final thoughts and comments before we need to move on? Hope, did you manage to capture a few bits for feedback?
I got as much as I could.
Brilliant, thank you.
Before everyone disappears, I just want to let you know from the boring side of things that when we leave this meeting, you can go straight into your second meeting, and then or workshop rather, and then once you've finished your second workshop, you're free to go. There's no main thing to go back to, so you're free to go from that point on.
Brilliant, thank you, Hope. And Natasha, can you, and Sheila, can we just make sure, actually Hope, you can probably help with this, can we make sure we have their emails so that we can send some resources through to them that they've asked for? Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, I'll make sure the health team knows about that.
Thank you, and a massive thank you to Crina, who's taken some time out. It's a really busy day, and a thank you to Pat and to Glenn. I'm really sad that he couldn't join us, but yeah, it's just one of those techie issues, I think, and hopefully we'll see you all again at some point. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Julie.
Bye.